Okay, thank you, David. As most of you remember,
You got your mic on?
is the mic on?
I don't know, is it red?
It's red.
Okay.
Okay.
Can't see.
As you all know, at a meeting, was it maybe 2 months ago, John appointed an ad hoc committee. Doc Sasha and Renee and I were appointed to take a look at the possibility of recommending moving to a medical examiner program from the present coroner setup that we have now here in Trempealeau County. And we have met just once, and we met with Rebecca and Susan. Were you there? I can't remember. I don't think I was. Okay. And we discussed some of the questions that we had, and Rebecca presented some of the information that she had accumulated in the past few months in reference to that and where it is operating in the state and things like that and job description and expenses or costs and so forth. So anyway, we presented her with some more questions and she has done some research, and I think, Susan, you've worked on a possible resolution, and we'll be meeting, the ad hoc committee should be meeting probably within the next few weeks or 3 weeks maybe, and going over that material and perhaps coming up with a plan of action to be brought to the various committees, and these committees included this committee, personnel, and law enforcement. And all three committees obviously have a role in this kind of a shift, because it obviously the need to look at the cost of the program. The supervising committee happens to be the law enforcement committee, and then personnel would be dealing with the issue of employment and so forth of someone in that capacity, if we would be moving towards a medical examiner role program. So anyway, that's where the ad hoc committee stands, and Rebecca has talked to the other two committees, presented them with information and so forth, and you've had discussion, and this is why we're here today, to share this information and perhaps some discussion, with the idea that the ad hoc committee will probably come back with a proposal, maybe to be discussed in full, and then voting perhaps this next month.
Mike, there's a battery in this one.
So I don't know if that introduces it. Rebecca, do you want to
Sure.
cover some of the points that you have worked on?
Yeah, I can just walk you through this packet, just to give you the background information and the input from the ad hoc committee, and just asking some good questions about why and what would be the differences between between a coroner, or a medical examiner, and why are we talking about it now? Because a coroner is an elected position. That position is not up for re-election until November of '26. But we want to, if you were to make a change, you need to make that change before April of 2026 because of primaries and things that happen, and this has to be noticed before that happens. So that's why we're going through the process now, so that gives you enough time to get it through and talk and think about a change like this. So the first map is just a picture of the state of Wisconsin. This is from WCA, where they have looked at this multiple times for counties and how many counties have a coroner and how many have a medical examiner. You can see that medical examiner is 41 counties and coroner is 31. If you move on to the next page, this is just a breakdown of comparison of the coroner versus medical examiner, and what the differences are in the positions. So in a coroner system, which is an elected position, there's minimum requirements just to be an elected, of course. You have to be 18 years old, you have to be a county resident, you have to be a U.S. citizen, of course, have to be elected by the popular vote. So just points in that is that really you don't have to have any type of medical background, professional credentials, no mandatory training or certification. Background checks are not completed on this individual. A candidate cannot be disqualified based on past professional misconduct unless criminally convicted. They're not subject to standard HR policy or performance reviews. And then risks or challenges that come with having that having elected for that type of role is potential for unqualified individuals to be placed in a critical public health role. The public has no way of verifying prior misconduct or lack of experience, and inconsistent accountability and limited professional oversight. If you flip it over, then it just talks about the medical examiner system, which is someone we'd hire. So you'd have minimum requirements. They're hired through professional recruitment process that we would put through human resources. They have to meet minimum education or field-related credentials. They usually come from a background of nursing, pathology, EMS, law enforcement, something like that. Have to pass the background check, and then they have to, follow HR policies, standards, county policies throughout their career. And then there's, of course, oversight that this position would report to the county administrator. They're held to performance expectations. They're subject to disciplinary procedures if misconduct occurs. Professional conduct and qualifications can be verified and monitored, and promotes consistency, transparency, and accountability in death investigations. So in making a shift like this, you could look at it as greater control over qualifications and integrity, improve public trust in this area, insurance that an individual in a sensitive role that is trained, vetted, held accountable in a role like that. So if you move on to, if you have questions, feel free to jump in too. I'm just kind of walking through this, but if you have anything, I put a comparative summary together by county on counties that have a medical examiner and what the costs are, population size, who they report to, their experience and such. And then just to point out, like, some common themes are, all positions involve investigating death scenes, determining cause or manner of death, work with law enforcement, hospitals, and families. They have to have a strong grounding in the medical field is anatomy, pathology, death investigation protocols, some certifications, and of course have to have strong soft skills working in very difficult situations sometimes. So if you look at packets that are following, then are some job descriptions from other counties that we took from and looked through, and then one that kind of came in last that's as a standalone is medical examiner for Jackson County. I had a discussion with Jackson County. Right now, they have a part-time, and they're concerned about the future and how they keep that position filled. And we had some conversation about the possibility of the two counties combining for a full-time position and being able to offer benefits then to a full-time position and be a shared position. But that is just something to think about, and how that, if you took that forward. Then we put together what a job description potentially could look like for Trempealeau County. The next form is from Ozaki County, that they were investigating this as well in 2022. This is from WCA, was shared, and that some information was put together as far as state statute and things. previous, we had, the coroner was in place for 2 years. That's actually changed to 4 years. There was some conversation through Ozaukee County that talks about resolution and ordinance. So working with Susan, the approach that if you'd like to take this forward would be through resolution. And once the resolution is approved, if that's approved, then we could update ordinances in the future on that. But the resolution would put that into place, would put a change into place. And as I stated, you do have to think about the timing of this so that it's completed before the election piece where you're bumping up against that. I have included the 2025 adopted budget, so you have a breakdown of everything there. That's what is current and would go into a medical examiner budget. And then Susan did draft a draft of a resolution and what that might look like. As Dick mentioned, I will work with the ad hoc committee in them really working through this in their next meeting. And then that would go back through the committees for your consideration. But this is just a way to bring all the information to you and ask questions and determine if there's anything that we should be thinking of or, other questions we should be asking at this time.
Any questions? So, hi, excuse me.
One of the questions I have is currently with the coroner, I've never, since I've sat at this board, ever received a report from the coroner, an annual report. So I think currently there is a large disconnect as to what's going on in that department. And then my other question is, I see for Jackson County, they've got maintains complete files and then statistical data on all cases. The only statistical data that we've ever received is from the sheriff's department, but nothing through the coroner. And it's not a question, I'm just stating that as what I've seen.
I was kind of along that same lines, thinking, most of these say report to the administrator or whatever. My thought would be the report should go either maybe law enforcement or health department, as I'll call the overall supervision of this. That's just my first thought. Open to other suggestions.
Sheriff and I did meet on this and talked about it. It's just, again, I think this person is kind of like you would, as a medical examiner, they would be a department head. So they have their own staff, their own department. So really, that would be in comparison to human services director, people like that I oversee, so.
And I guess as a follow-up to that comment, we all know that the committee structure as we have it now with an administrator is that the committees basically set policy, but the day-to-day oversight is by the administrator. And obviously, I think I would agree with you, David, that person should be reporting to their oversight committee or their policy committee or whatever we want to call them, as well as to the administrator. That would be an important facet. And I know in the past I agree with you that we have not had much for reporting from that position in the past. That is perhaps one of the strengths of a medical examiner position, that would be a mandated sort of situation, that the reporting and sharing of that information. Plus maintaining the files and the records in the courthouse. And I think there has been a history probably over the years that the coroner maintained records in their home. with the medical examiner, it does change that, and there would be, that is really a matter of public record. And that would be held in the courthouse, and then that position would have a space that they could work out of here, which changes the situation considerably.
Would there be a requirement that that person be a department head?
I don't,
Couldn't they-
I just want to clarify,
I'm just-
in my conversation with the sheriff, we talked about this person would still report to law enforcement committee. I think we talked about that, but anyway. But this is not like, I didn't say, I want this person under me. It was more like the sheriff and I both talked about it, and the sheriff agreed that that person should be would be under the county administrator. It wasn't, if the sheriff wants it under the law enforcement, that's fine. I did not ask for that, but I'm just saying, and mostly, that person is considered under as leading that area.
My first thought, the dollars again.
Yeah,
If we make a department head out of it, that's more salary than a assistant, I'll call it. That's,
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is its own department, even though it could fall under the sheriff's department. It's its own entity, but what I do see is that working in conjunction, there would be many cases and much information that should be transferred and in connection with the sheriff's department. I don't think, I'm not a believer that whatever the title is, whether you're a director or whatever, that all of a sudden that comes with pay. I think if we remain competitive and based on what the job description is and what other counties are paying, and if we're competitive, I think we're okay in that ballpark.
One thing I'd like to add is,
Please.
Susan might have to do some research, but there could be a conflict of interest of putting a coroner medical examiner underneath the auspice of a sheriff.
okay.
Probably has to stand alone.
And that's fair, over the course of the last couple of years, we've looked at, various aspects of the coroner's duties versus the sheriff's duties, and sometimes in the right set of circumstances, that's entirely possible.
Okay. Never thought of that one.
Good point.
It would be nice to see too, is what, you've got the 25 budget for the office, what the medical examiner's budget would look like in 27. So you'd have a full year with everything, so we know what we're gonna put on the tax roll.
There's going to be additional cost, I'm sure.
Well, it'd be nice to know
How
how
much, I don't
severe
know.
and where we're gonna get the money from. That's,
Would that mean, like, you're thinking though of a 50% is what, right? I mean, if you look at the chart that I gave you,
okay.
So Monroe County, with a population of 46,000, has had a part-time, they just switched to a full-time. Dunn County, with a population of 45,000, has a half-time. Russ County, they have more hours, it looks like. Barron County, though, 20 hours a week, population 46,000. So again, it's just, I'm looking at comparables, so I would say it seems as if a 50% position is, maybe something you could start with. Then the question comes back to, well, do you combine that person with another county?
And you
but-
can have, and all that's great, but I wanna see the numbers on it and show what the whole year is gonna cost us, not $26 an hour. Okay, then, if you look at the coroner's budget, there's a lot more involved than that. The final number is what I wanna see, exactly what it
Sure,
would
an
cost us.
estimate.
Compared, now you showed us what it costs for us to have the coroner.
Mm-hmm.
What does it cost to have the medical examiner for the whole year, or like you say, even if it's half-time, or part-time, I should say. What that cost us overall throughout the year with all the added expenses. And then we have something to compare apples to apples. So, I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
Just a
And
little
the
more.
deputy medical examiners, the ones that are on call. So,
Will they be
That's all cost.
county employees too?
The
I mean,
medic-
not county, but follow under, right now, they're a outside force, I'll call them.
Well, I don't think they are, David. Mary, how are they paid?
Yep, yep, they would be the same as we're doing now.
Yeah, it wouldn't change.
Okay.
And I think, if I may respond to your comment, I think all we can do as an ad hoc committee, and we'll certainly do this, is to set forth a proposed budget as we see it at this time. You know, we don't know what the future will bring, obviously, and I think maybe to present something, say 20 hours a week, based on that, and then base it on joining with another county, which would probably mean a little more money because they would be full-time and they would receive fringe benefits. So we could provide that if that would help.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great, Dick. It's 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week, split with another county.
Yeah.
Just so we have a good idea of
Sure.
where we're going.
Sure.
You know, I think all those are good ideas, but this way we have something to look at, and we've got numbers to
Right,
look
right.
at and say, okay, which would be better, 20, 40, or another county, which I don't have a problem with either one. It's just whichever one I think is more favorable to us to do a good job and still be fiscally, financially sound in the decision that we make for the
Sure.
county.
And we'll try to do that. I think that's an important thing.
Just a question, Dick, before you. You feel it has to be a full-time position if it's with two counties, or just because the hours would be needed to be full-time?
That's a good question, too.
So I think I think anyway, that I would ask Susan's opinion on this too. Like, we can give you an estimate of those things to consider. I think the consideration then is, do you move to the coroner, but you wouldn't be making that decision along with the change to the coroner. That would come later, in a year and a half or whatever it is. But I understand, yeah, you want that up front to kind of look and see what are the differences, but you wouldn't actually make that decision until the actual hiring of the position.
I think some of the unknowns, quite frankly, is because the position hasn't been in the courthouse, so that there's been a review of how much time is required. We're at a little bit of a loss too, that we don't fully know all of that information. And I guess that's why everything is going to be certainly an estimate.
Right.
The best we can do at this time.
Exactly, and I don't expect any more, because
Yeah.
we don't know, but just, we need something that we could go off of. And
Absolutely.
use to say, okay, which do we think?
Thank you.
Thank you guys for doing all the work there.
Yep. And I'm thinking the general consensus here is that this is something we do need to pursue seriously.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I guess I've been kind of egging this thing on a little bit, because I think, the discussion has been in the wind for several years. And I think professionalism is important to maintain. And I think I guess, in my estimation, that potentially this has a greater potential for continuing to have that good coverage. More of an assurance maybe of that.
Okay?
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I didn't see it in here, but of course I haven't read all this, but I would like also the ad hoc committee to look at, I think, one of the other concerns is, as far as a medical examiner goes, the current coroner is working out of their own vehicle.
No,
No, that's a
No.
county vehicle.
no, in the
county
last several
purchased
months, it's
vehicle.
been out of a county-owned vehicle.
Okay, but there's no signage on the vehicle.
No, I don't think there is.
No.
Okay. So, and maybe this is a good question for the sheriff. So when the current coroner pulls up to an accident site and whatnot, are they just automatically recognized by the department and local municipalities? Or should there be signage on their vehicle?
Well, everybody knows the current coroner and what the vehicle looks like, I think. So I think it's fair to say they just recognize her when she approaches the scene. I do have a number of new deputies out there and getting to be a number of new police officers as well who may not know her, where that could be an issue. One thing we did during COVID is we had magnetic decals made up for my unmarked squad cars, and that might be an option to think about too if there was some pushback on a fully marked unit, so.
Get an aluminum vehicle.
Right.
Of course, do we have cars with steel doors anymore?
My knowledge, Ford is the only one that doesn't, so I don't know if the others have gone that way yet or not, so.
I got a Kia, that's.
Aluminum?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Dick? I think we've made an assignment for you, Dick.
No, I think we're gonna move right along that. We'll get Doc and Renee together here with Rebecca and Susan, and we'll try to pull it all together, so.
Okay, sounds
Appreciate you listening to us today. I think, we want to keep everybody in the loop because it's a major change, but we need from time to time, to examine major changes.
Okay. Anything else on this? Thank you, Dick. Now, we're going to go back to item 8, which Mary just told me she hasn't found any, right? I'll throw it over to you to talk about it.
So Paul and I were going over some other documents and we came across this resolution from January.
Mary, can you just turn on your microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you.
From January of 2024. And he said that he had seen that it had been postponed. He said you need to bring that back to exec finance. So I brought it back. I tried getting a hold of him to find out, to make sure that the $162,150 listed in the resolution is still available. I couldn't locate that account. I was looking under the revenues and I didn't specifically see it. But there's a lot of revenue numbers to go through, so I can't put my finger on it to say that the money is still there. I don't know why it was postponed when it came, because it was an exec finance of January of '24. It was approved to go to county board, and then I see with the resolution, it was said postponed. I don't know what took place at that point. I wasn't here. So Paul just said it should be brought back.
Okay, so,
That's where I'm
but
at.
at this point, we don't have enough information, so
I do
I'm
not.
suggesting we'll just move it on to the August agenda
Okay,
to bring forward whether,
okay.
did it get postponed, did it get paid, where's the money? All that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
so, okay, be on the August agenda. Item 9, discussion, possible action on 2 new positions at HHS.
Perfect. Thanks for the reminder. Okay, so these two positions, to kind of set the background for this a little bit. We've run a little bit lean in some areas that have created workload gaps, specifically in finance, and then more in our records and contracting areas. And so, because of that, it feels like we're always running to catch up, especially in the fiscal area, and make sure that we're meeting state deadlines. We're requesting a lot of different extensions. You're going to see some of the audit findings that we've had in the past, and we want to be more proactive and get ahead of this. And so that's part of the reason for the lead fiscal associate position, to start with that one. It's also, we want to get in, as part of being proactive, we want to get ahead of that and be able to plan more for on the fiscal side, do some analysis and say, hey, what kinds of efficiencies can we find? What kind of processes can we get in place so that they're replicatable too, so that when we do have turnover in positions, we have some processes in our fiscal department, but not what we need right now. And Kelly doesn't have a lot of time to devote to that. She has a lot of things coming at her that she's constantly looking to catch up on. And so this fiscal position would also be And I know at some point that Lynn, in the previous health department, has said that she's looking to retire at some point. And so my goal would be for this person to also provide some backup, learn some of those pieces so that when Lynn retired, we can have that person take on those duties pending an overview of exactly, where everything should go, like a reassignment of duties and that kind of thing. My goal would be to not replace that position, the current position that was in the health department, once that retirement occurs. So this person would take on those duties and provide us, I think, with some better planning and analysis for the department as well, and get ahead of the audit findings and not having to request deadline extensions from the state all the time. So let's see, what else did I have on that one? Yeah, it's the analysis. And there's also, because of that, you always run the risk, and because we have so many manual processes right now, so when the new system comes in, that should help us as well. But you always run the risk of us not capturing the revenue that we should be in all of the just plethora of programs that are and funding sources that are within Health and Human Services. So I want to avoid that risk too, and make sure that we've got those pieces in place. I'll stop there for the lead fiscal associate position. Any questions about that one to begin with?
When is this person retiring that you said she might retire?
I don't have a definite date in mind, but there is full funding for both of these two positions that I'm talking about here. And so when that occurs, so we have funding for all the positions right now with no increase to levy. However, when we may have some savings at that point when that does occur. And then I'm thinking with this new person and then the new financial system, we should be able to make that work, and we should have full staff. We should have sufficient staffing to do what we need to do at that point then. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it. I mean, that's a good question. And I would hope that there's some savings. I don't know what that would look like, though.
It's just that, somebody says, I'm going to retire. Well, that could be 2
Right,
months.
yes,
Could
yes.
be 2 years, and then you got this
Right.
whole person here.
Yeah.
It's just supposed to slide in. Well, they cost us quite a bit to have 2 people.
Right. Right, and that's why I didn't want to plan on additional levy funding at all. I want this to be completely funded by our reimbursable programs, that we can either fit in the rates or capture reimbursement on the back end as well. So yeah, I'm not looking for any additional funding from levy dollars.
And Jay, I think, because we delved into this much more in detail in the Health and Human Services meetings, but as far as the person you're speaking of about retirement, they're currently doing fiscal manager stuff for the health department and are not really schooled in the sense of all of the different programs with human services.
Correct.
And the person that would be hired for this would be able to do either one and or both.
Yeah.
For a
because-
multitude of things,
Right.
not as much on the job trained, but actually having a proper education in physical management.
Right, and there's crossover in some of the systems between the health department and human services. I'll use GEARS, it's a state system where we claim reimbursement through that system. Human services does it, but also a lot of the health department funding comes through there. So this person would already have a knowledge of some of that prior to, that retirement occurring too. So, and they're more of a lead position, so they could provide backup for Kelly as the fiscal manager. And so I always worry about those one-person positions where they don't have a lot of, if something happened to her, people say I should win the lottery instead of getting hit by a bus. But, but I mean, it's that lack of depth that I worry about when we're already running to catch up a lot of times. So, no, good question though. I mean, other questions about that one?
Trying for the life of me to find it. I found it at home, where you used the backup information for where the monies would come from.
Yeah, I do have a lot of, I'm asking for it this year so that we can get that in place for all those reasons that I just talked about. I mean, and to get us ahead before we get to the end of this year and go, oh, shoot, now we're running to catch up on a lot of these year-end functions as well. So, but yeah, the funding for the lead fiscal associate position, some of it would come from four different, I believe it's four different sources. So part of our Department of Children and Families and Department of Health Services based county allocations would be used for a portion of that. We would revise our rate for our Kids with Disabilities program to include a portion of that position as well, and the benefits as well. And then that would be built into our 26 rate. Now, some of our rates we can revise mid-year, like our CLTS rate or the Kids with Disabilities program. Some of them, we would have to do, capture that at year end on the back end. So to capture the reimbursement for the full cost of that. And then it would be built into some of our indirect and AMSO expenses for the position that would be spread across and charged to the different units in the department. So those are the funding sources for that.
I can't find it to get it in front of me, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Of my ignorance in that department. But in the one category, my memory says there was 4 items listed. The first one was talking about county base. Other ones mentioned about adjusting rates, but that one didn't mention adjusting rates. In the
lead fiscal associate?
Where your funding was coming from. It was the county base rate or something like that was the term?
So from DCF, the Department or Division of Children and Family, or Department of Children and Families and Department of Health Services, we get a base allocation from both of those entities to pay, and here's your amount, make it work for the functions you need to provide, for the mandated services, which, as we know, is not always covering things.
So then.
So for both of those positions, it would be a portion of that, but also for both of those. So let me tell you about the ones that are the same. I think it's almost entirely the same here. So for both of them, we could revise our rate with DHS for our Kids with Disabilities services. And then we would build it into our new rate for 26, because that's the one thing that we can revise it mid-year, but we can also set it then for the next year. And then that's one rate that we can. Now, for the CCS rate, and that's the kids and adults with for mental health services, that's a rate where you can't change it mid-year, but at the end of the year, whatever costs haven't been covered by your rate for that year, you go through the WMCR process, and that's where you capture the rest of the cost of the costs you incurred but weren't built into your rate.
Okay, and that's the one we're talking about. Like I said, in
Yeah.
your I think it was 4 items listed.
Yeah,
There was
yes.
3 of them listed, we can adjust our rates. The other one didn't say anything about that, but you're now saying that's the one at end of the year can be adjusted to.
Correct,
To cover
Yeah.
the additional, okay.
Yeah, and so that reimbursement, and that's a good point to know too. So that reimbursement can come up to, what would you say, like a year and a half after the end of the year? Well, Mary's like, I don't know yet. But Kelly has said it can be anywhere from a year and a half to like a year and 9 months after that.
Okay.
We claim that. So we would get reimbursed for that. There's just a delay on
Eventually.
that. Yeah, but here's the other piece too that I didn't put on here. We're underspending so much in some of these base county allocations that these will more than likely more than make up for any kind of reimbursement before we even get that this year yet. So just because we have vacancies, and it's been challenging to fill some of those vacancies too. So it's coming from a lot of different places, and even this year, I think our base allocations would more than likely cover those positions as well, that portion of those positions too. So it's so complex with trying to make sure that, that we're capturing all of our revenue, and this will actually help with that, because the vacancies, then we kind of have to reallocate expenses to those base county allocations to make sure we capture those full amounts. So we don't want to leave money on the table.
Just a question.
Yeah.
I know zero about AI, other than I know that it could really change things,
Right.
but we maybe can't move forward as a county with it until the state does. Is that where we're at there? I know
Well-
there's private companies that are talking, whole departments being wiped out, within the next 2 years with some AI programs.
Right. Well, I do want to try it for like maybe some, like writing policies or something. Other
Right.
human services directors have said, hey, I tried this just to play around with it to like write a policy or a
Okay.
process or something like
Right.
that.
Okay.
However, it's good that you mentioned that because it's coming along where DHS and DCF, the two state departments that what I was talking about, they are wanting to put in their contract for next year that counties are not allowed to use AI for anything.
okay. There we go.
Well, but WCA is pushing back on it too, saying that's maybe for your function, for our functions that are mandated by those two departments.
Right.
But it's an overreach to say, hey, we can't use it for anything. I mean, that's an infringement on the county. That's the position of WCA anyway, is that's
that's
an
good to know,
infringement.
right.
So we want to be able to use it to the extent that we can and is prudent and, that kind of thing. But,
Thank-
yeah, so, no, we're looking at all different, we're trying to be creative because, it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about efficiencies or how are you using things differently, that kind of thing, so.
But I think that's a really good question, and also as we move into our new software systems, but I think Jay is already thinking about that, as he's talking about, when we think about retirements, that's what we're always considering. So we'll always have to be looking at that as we get those softwares up and running and as new AI tools come into place, how we can make better efficiencies, yeah.
Because I don't want to just have positions to have positions. I want to make sure that they're filling a need, they're filling a workload gap, they're helping us get ahead of the game, and not just, I'm not interested in adding positions, because we have more administrative work then too in our department. If every time we add staff, Mary's got more, Mary's staff have more work to do too, so.
I would just say Susan and I have worked through human services, and these are really, they're two valued positions that would really, I would say, add a lot of value to our human services area. And Supervisor Turner, being on the board for the Health and Human Services Committee, would I'm sure be able to say the same.
Yeah, and I think that, without getting too far into the weeds, there's, just in general, if you can imagine a social worker that has to do fiscal documentation of their hours and make sure they're capturing each and every, they may go out and do a case, and yet some of their hours fall into two different programs through the state. So divvying that up and having somebody that is sharp enough to capture all those. Not to mention the state is continuing to implement more and more regulations on the documentation and things like that. And these positions would capture all of that as well as their time to do it. So we would be in compliance. We spent, I want to say maybe Susan or Rebecca, but I want to say about 6 months last year in just the health department because we were missing entities. So,
And those replicatable processes, I can't say that enough, and I think people in the department kind of roll their eyes at me sometimes because I say it so often, but it's true, when you have turnover, if you have, it's not gonna be the be-all, end-all, but if you get ahead of the game and have these processes in place, then it's, here's what I can train you to, and then we can find, oh, shoot, we need to tweak this a little bit, or we need to, change how we do that. And when we have the new financial system, I think, A, that's gonna give us a lot of different good information that we maybe don't have easy access to now. And then B, that could change some of those processes too, and so I wanna get ahead of that, as we start to implement that, so, yeah.
If I may, just to kind of echo some of the other speakers, this is a complicated subject. HHS has, for example, and we'll talk about this more in a moment, their own set of contracts. And so they have their own processes and their own set of regulations. In addition to that, we've had some processes we can't follow because we don't have enough staff. And sometimes those processes would actually be revenue generating for the county. And again, we just don't have capacity. And so that's something that would be beneficial.
It would, that's a good additional point, yeah. yeah. And I think that also leads to the records custodian position too. I mean, that position, it's been very hit or miss as to who's responding to records requests from attorneys, other counties, the state. I mean, just the whole gamut of that, and it falls on this supervisor, and a lot of our units, they're also obviously have full plates, and so they don't get to those in the most timely way either. So a piece of that is gonna be responding to requests, but another big piece of it is gonna be kind of, again, getting our internal house in order. How do we store all of our records? We have some programs in manual files or on our G drive, and then we have other programs in state systems, and then we have other programs in our TCM software, case management software. But we have one foot in a lot of different places for some programs. So how do we get that in order and get that organized? And then that also feeds into the billing in many cases. So again, you're reducing some of that some of those manual steps to make sure we're not missing any billing or billing incorrectly. And we found some issues with that too. We just don't have enough people to do those double checks and make sure that we're following the state reimbursement guidelines in some cases. We do, but we don't have the extra layer of oversight, or double checks, I'll call it. This is more of that piece too. So, and we're diving into revising our HIPAA and privacy policies as well. And I want them to get our whole record system organized. And then if we decide, hey, we want to pursue this new software that can incorporate all of our programs that aren't already in a state software program, I would want them to be one of the leads on that too. And I've talked with Tim about that a little bit, and he said, hey, if you're going to do it soon. But we'd get reimbursement for that as well, as a part of our program costs. So a lot of moving parts. So, I mean, what other questions do you have about like the records custodian position or the lead fiscal associate?
I think you've covered it fairly well.
Trying to get ahead of the game without adding cost, and that's yeah, right.
So, and I don't know if it's just, did we have a resolution to go along with this today, or anything like that?
No,
What-
just
no.
action on this,
What's that?
just action.
Action, so what does our action need to be?
To approve the 2 new positions if you so.
Approve the 2 new, and that then to go to full county board for approval, or does it end here?
PD and I
Okay,
don't-
so we're the first one.
No, it already went to Health and Human Services Board, and they approved it. PB approved it, and now this is the
Okay.
third step here.
I make a motion, we approve it. for
Approve the 2 positions as presented. Okay,
I'll second that.
and a second. Any more discussion? Questions? Doc, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, go. Oh,
Yes,
you're voting? Okay.
yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Item 10. is
11.
this- 11, no, 10.
Oh. Well, I don't think
You got
Jeremy's
your
here.
lines in the wrong place, John.
I don't think Jeremy's here.
Jeremy's not gonna be here.
He's not gonna be here.
That's why I'm here.
Oh, okay. That's what I was suspecting, so.
We figured that.
Proceed, please.
So, just a little history, when we built the new jail, the Justice Center, the new jail included some steel plates in the walls that would be used for future expansion, for an additional, at that time, 20 beds. The jail, or 22 beds, excuse me. The jail opened up with 76 beds, and it has a total capacity of 98 beds. And that capacity is reached by welding bunks onto these already installed steel plates in the walls. So we didn't think there was gonna be a need for it up front. This is a 50-year solution, so, we were pushing some of those expenses down the road, not knowing if we'd ever need them. But the out-of-county housing demand has been pretty high and pretty steady in the last year, and now Buffalo County has approached the sheriff's office, and Rebecca's been included on these discussions. They are talking about closing their jail and housing all of their inmates with Trempealeau County on a contract basis. And it could include the dispatch center as well. There are some things that have to be worked out there yet before that could be entertained. So we've had some discussions about adding these bunks now to be prepared for if that time comes. When the building was built, our construction manager at that time quoted us $1,500 a bed to add those beds at a later date. We did get an official quote from Samuel's group here a couple of months ago, and that cost had increased to $2,500 a bed. So Jeremy started doing some research with local companies and found that one company out of Pigeon Falls could build the beds and install them for a total cost of $9,000 and some odd dollars, whatever's on that resolution.
9,500.
What's that?
9,500.
$9,500, built and installed. And then maintenance would come back through and do all the touch-up painting on the walls in there after the fact. So the resolution is for $9,500 to come from the general fund, and with the expectations that as we fill them up with out-of-county inmates, that revenue goes back into the general fund to reimburse it. So the resolution's been prepared. Law enforcement did a vote on it. They didn't do a resolution. They approved it by vote. I don't believe there was or was there a resolution on law enforcement? Anybody here on the law enforcement committee? Maybe it was a resolution at the law enforcement committee. So they approved either the resolution or by vote anyway. I think it was a resolution, actually, to tell you the truth. So now it's going before exec finance, and then make its way to the county board at the end of the month here yet, or middle of the month, so.
Help me out again. How many beds are we talking again? I'm sorry.
Originally, it would have been an additional 22 beds, but
Okay.
throughout this bidding
Right.
process,
Yeah.
we found that there was actually one extra bed installed at the time, so we had 77 the day we opened up, and one of the walls only has one steel plate in it, and it requires two. So we're down to 19, and that's what we're gonna add is 19 beds.
And that'll put you at what number then?
And that'll put us at a total of 97 then.
What? And you foresee we're gonna move to those numbers with this Buffalo County?
Well, I can't predict the future that they're going to come here, but they want to come here, and it's kind of like the courtroom up there. You know, we added that additional courtroom, and although it gets used a lot,
Right,
it was added
okay.
because if we ever get in line for a second judge, we have to be ready for it. And this is kind of along those lines, when we want to be ready for it, and it's a very low expense to be ready for some pretty good revenue, so.
So will this, I'm assuming this will conform with all the requirements for correction and all of that, even though they're being made by a different company?
So that company came here, where there is a spare bed laying over there, and that company come and got that bed and took it right back to their shop, and it will be built to that identical spec. And our jail inspector is involved in this process as well, so. And the state Department of Corrections jail inspector is involved in this already. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
I got a question, Brett. With all the inmates that we have now, and the idea behind building such a big jail was because it would be actually kind of a moneymaker. Where does that money go that we get paid from the other counties? Where does that go? Does that go is there a maintenance fund set up where in case you needs to do something like this, or let's say one of the inmates breaks something, or where do we get the money for that stuff?
So far, right now, it's just, it's offsetting the levy in my budget. We budget annually for any maintenance. Jeremy does most of the maintenance budgeting in his budget. To my knowledge, nothing is set aside for any extraordinary maintenance, just your normal maintenance that would occur throughout the year. So, but when we bill and the monies are received for the out-of-county housing as it is right now, it goes into a revenue item on our jail, in a jail budget, and of course, anything that we are, it offsets the tax levy portion of the budget as well. And if we're under budget at the end of the year, it goes back into the general fund then.
So this money too would, if we approved it, you would pay that back to the general fund.
It would just be, it would just be more on the same line that's already there. It would just be more added to that same line. What it does is, it offsets the jail budget even more, but like, it only goes back to the general fund if I'm under budget at the end of the year. But it goes to offset the current jail expenses. Of course, with increased numbers comes increased food prices and increased laundry, so there are some expenses that it has to absorb as well.
Increased maintenance.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming if we're going to potentially maybe work something out with Buffalo County, that not only in that daily fee per inmate, we would also have some sort of monies in there that just maintain our jail long-term. And eventually, we would recoup this $9,500. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is this $9,500 is taxpayer monies of people of Trempealeau County. So I think we want to make sure that we do recoup this through Buffalo County.
Well, unless I have all kinds of separate lines in the budget, Jackson County, Buffalo County, any county we house for all falls into that same out-of-county housing line. So this is just more out-of-county beds that we are filling throughout the year. It just happens to be that if it works out with Buffalo County, they're going to take probably what's remaining at that time. So right now, we're housing roughly anywhere from 10 to 15 for Jackson County, and we've always got 1 or 2 from Buffalo County here right now. So this would potentially be an additional 15 per day, inmates per day, at a cost of $50 per day. So that's.
So if you increase the number of inmates, do you need to also increase the number of staff? Which, I guess, I'm assuming if you did, that's going to increase your budget, hence levy.
So the only thing that I'm going to be asking for is a full-time jail programming director. And I've planted a seed into the county board years ago when we first started talking about these types of numbers in our jail. And when we start getting all of our out-of-county inmates back here and we can spend more time with our inmates, that's when I was gonna address this full-time programming director. And I did attempt to get that position last year already at the current numbers at that time. And at that point, it was decided not to. And now when the numbers increase, I'm going to be asking for that position again. And what a programming director does is basically does all the scheduling of the programs. Over in the jail, they offer many different types of programs to inmates to help them potentially succeed once they're released from custody. And when you start managing 50 inmates or more programming, that can be pretty daunting for somebody when you're spreading it out over a number of jailers. It really requires one person. And that's the only position I'm going to be asking for. But I did say it's kind of a wait and see, though. We will be adequately staffed according to the Department of Corrections recommendations for those types of numbers. Whether it's 76 beds or 98 beds, current staffing met the Department of Corrections recommendations. And that was the same number of staff that was in the old jail when we had 32 beds, but the bad design type of thing.
But your $50 a day number, that calculates in food, laundry, all this sort of stuff. Your rate could or would be adjusted to accommodate this program? I mean, the part of the cost of that would all be calculated into the per day cost too, would it not?
Well, it's, there's some thought there that, why would Trempealeau County provide this type of service to other inmates from other counties? And to avoid a potential discrimination lawsuit is one reason I would think. But the numbers, the out-of-county housing, I I guess, right now, Fort Jackson County's paying $45 a day. That's going to be increased. I'll be proposing that to go to $50 a day at the end of the year, along with this $50 a day. And I did not anticipate increasing that number to pay for this other position. I feel that the revenue of the out-of-county housing is still substantial enough to offset it, so. I have reached out to National Institute of Corrections to try to get an easy formula to figure out how much it costs for an out-of-county inmate, but, you know, personnel costs are 85–90% of your budget, and I have not added any personnel, and yet we're still bringing in $50 a day additional. So we do have some additional food costs, but we're talking, you know, maybe $5 a day total for the meals, and medical is all reimbursed. So that all is on the home county. So it's, to me, $50 a day pays for that, plus there's extra, so, but again, I don't have that magic formula, so.
Okay.
There wasn't that part of when it was proposed to the board before us, the advantage of putting the new jail in was that you wouldn't have to hire anybody else. You could do the same job because of the way it was built structurally and.
That wasn't the advantage of putting a new jail in.
That was one of.
That was one of the,
no,
that was
It was
one
a
of
bonus.
one of the benefits of going from a bad design to a good design, is that the current staffing levels would be maintained.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a benefit.
Well, that was a sales pitch I heard.
No.
Just telling you.
The sales pitch was safety of the staff and inmates and meeting DOC codes. The benefit of going to the design we had was that we did not have to add staff.
That was one of them, yeah. There's a bunch of things that go into it, I understand.
So
We're just
Okay,
we're just
I'll
talking
make-
here.
I'll make a motion
Dick?
to, go ahead, Dick.
I guess I was concerned about the need for more staff. I do have a concern, and you have this daily, and that is keeping positions filled, I think. And overtime is something that has always in the past been kind of significant, and it may still be.
Yeah, so, right now I have a sergeant position open that we'll be attempting to fill, and then I do have, one jail position open. So, you're gonna make me say it, but we're sitting as good as we have been in a long time.
You don't say it.
I don't wanna say
Don't
it.
say it.
So,
Don't jinx
but
yourself.
yeah, staffing is always an issue.
Yeah,
And it's in every jail across the state, so I don't see it getting any better anytime either,
Okay.
anytime soon. So, yeah, you're correct in saying that.
Okay.
But that could happen with our current number of inmates, yes, adding more inmates adds a little more work, but it doesn't necessarily add more staff, so potentially we would still operate just like we do now when we're short-staffed. But
Okay, one point you didn't make, and I'll make it for you, that there is potential with a program director that will aid in helping to maintain order and maybe keep some of the pressure down on the people on the floor.
That is correct. That would be a certified jail position, and it'd be a Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 type of position, because that's how all those, that's how the outside people work, when this programmer is working with the outside entities. But those are our busy hours during the day as well. So you're exactly right. It would be staff available to assist the current jailers if and when needed.
Well, that wasn't the point I was making, but you made that. The point I was attempting to make is that if you're able to provide activities and beneficial programming, it does take some pressure off the staff. You may have pressure in moving people around, but you may have maybe more adherence to policy and rules that you expect people to live by while they're there.
More well-behaved inmates, yes.
Yeah.
That does come with programming.
Yep.
So,
I'll make a motion then to authorize the addition of 19 bunks to the county jail and allocate $9,500 from the general fund.
Second.
I have a second. More discussion, questions?
I would like to see, to me, I don't know, maybe this is just an idea, to set up a fund with the jail as the money comes in for the inmates. Somehow we set up a plan that they can make the payments on some, if they had to do this, let's say you break 2 beds, or you gotta come back to us and get 2 beds. Somehow take that money, put it in a fund, and then you can use it for maintenance rather than having to go into the general fund every time. And I know you said it goes back into it at the end of the year, but it would be a little simpler than going into the general fund every time if something would happen in the jail. And I would, since that money's coming in, and it does go into like your budget, Brad, but I would like, somehow we could set up something where we wouldn't have to come here for repairs, maintenance, putting in 19 more beds. It just seems kind of, when you have that kind of money coming in every month, you have something there to use.
Well,
Just something to think about.
I will say that typically if I have a piece of equipment break and it costs me $10,000 to fix it, generally those types of funds are in our budget, and at the end of the year, if I'm short, then I would come and ask to make up that shortfall, but, you know, yes, things are going to break, you just can't predict when, so.
Right.
You know,
So
if
have
you want
it
to be
there.
ready for the unpredictable, and the sheriff not have to come back at the end of the year for money that he didn't know he was gonna have to spend, like, you know,
Well, this
like
money-
retirement's due to you. That'd be one way to do it, but typically, right now, we handle most of our mechanical costs, that unexpected mechanical costs within our current budget, but, so.
I see your point, what you're trying to get at, Adi. I'm just not quite sure that that's something we want to or need to go to at this point.
I would just
Council
say.
have- Oh, okay, Rebecca.
Well, I would just say typically you would want, you don't want, you want fewer outstanding pockets of money
Right.
sitting. So I don't know that that's a good idea. I think you want it to come back and work through the process.
It goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the past several years, that same question has come up. And you know, the unallocated general fund has tended to be that central fund that covers unscheduled emergencies or whatever. So that does act as that pot, in a sense, like the sheriff is saying, if he can get by savings, whatever, of $100,000, that's going to go back there and it'll be there. I think it's just easier to have one fund, but hey.
I agree with you.
and I
That's
think-
100% correct.
I tend to agree with that, keeping it all, rather than set up more funds. Brett, is there a possibility that your report or your financial report could maybe be more specific on this money and show something that Adi's kind of asking for? Is that anything that could be looked into?
Well, it's probably already in the financial report to my monthly report to the Law Enforcement Committee. We go through all the finances there, and, but I certainly could address specific expenses at a quarterly county board
Specific
meeting.
expenses along with the revenue that is paying for it type thing. Right? That might be worthwhile looking into without creating too much more work for you.
He does a nice job in the quarterly report, I would say. It's
Okay.
very thorough.
So, okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve this 9,500 for beds. I forgot what it was for a second.
I just want to say one thing, is
Okay.
that there is no guarantee that Buffalo County is going to do this yet. They are just in the talks of it. However, my budget number this year for revenue is $260,000 or $290,000. So
That's without the Buffalo County
that's without the Buffalo
possibility.
County inmates.
Okay.
Yep. So
Yeah, because
that-
they've
that-
tossed around the idea of building a jail
what's that?
as well.
They have
Or a
talked
new
about.
justice center, like we did.
Yeah, they talked about building a combined facility with Pepin County. It sounds like Pepin County has backed out of that now, and the sheriff assures me that Buffalo County will not be building. They may try to remodel theirs, to get it up to code, but even now the assistant administrator and the county board chair are still pushing towards contracting all the inmates out of county, so more to come.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Item 11, discussion and possible action regarding creation of a county ethics ordinance and supervisor code of conduct with Susan.
Thank you. This is a continuation from last month. And if you either pulled up your June SharePoint link, or I sent an email on 5/28 of this year at 1:15. So either way, there were a number of model or potential ethics codes from other counties that we could review. In addition to that, there was a model code that Attorney Phillips had presented in May that I had pulled out of his PowerPoint and put into a single PDF. And so last month I had asked, and it still is something I want to keep in the forefront, I had asked for you to review it and to see what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to take forward. Because for me to start drafting this, and this is where I want to keep the eye on it, there are a lot of just innate policy things that will happen in the drafting. So I want to know what you guys like before I start, so I can do my best to make sure that it reflects the county board's policy. And so I know I had, excuse me, a number of questions last month as well. But, you know, if you've had a chance to look at it, I'd ask, which one did you like the best? You know, what kind of things were you looking for? What kind of things did you not look for, or excuse me, not like?
I'll start with, I did not look at it again this last couple days to refresh. But when I went through it, I thought that Andy's model one was a pretty good place to start. I thought it was, I forget which county was what that had how many, 14 pages, and
Some of them are long.
yeah, that seemed a bit too much. So I'm thinking shorter is better if we can.
And just as a clarification, the model code is really for the Board of Supervisors. The ethics ordinance is for all of us, including elected officials, staff, and so forth. I can certainly take the model code and start drafting that for something here, and bring that back here. Is there a ordinance that you guys would like, or where would you like to go with that?
My only thought in seeing all of them and reading through and just trying to compare and contrast, other than getting them in different orders and just generalized things, they relatively all said the same thing. So then my question to you would be, are we better to be a little more open and general in the ethics and things like that? Or is it better to be very precise in the verbiage? And I tried to think of it myself, and I was like, I don't know which is better. Because, yeah, do we really need 14 pages? No, we should. If we need 14 pages, our county's in trouble.
You know, I think that's a good point. And with any sort of ordinance, we want it flexible to address the situation at hand. And we don't know what that's gonna be, because today's situation is gonna be different than tomorrow's, right? So some of the key things will be making sure that our definitions are in place, that we have a process to review. You know, and I think I had mentioned that maybe this committee could serve as that ethics committee, that we define, and that goes back to the definitions, but I think this was something that Andy had mentioned too, but, you know, what is going to be the magic threshold that's too much too? Because you could go to a conference, and I've gone to conferences, and And you can get pens and paper and, you know, candy, and that's probably all less than $5 or $10. But then when does it become more than that? So it's up to you, but I think the biggest things will be defining what we want and then setting for a process to review it. What we want to cover.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that this committee could go a year down the road and decide that they want to tighten it up a little bit, or the rules were just so stringent, you couldn't do anything. So it's not set in stone. We can always tweak it.
Absolutely.
So if we start somewhere, and I guess I would refer to you for that, start somewhere, let us review it and/or tweak it, and then move it forward.
And in regard to your point about, you know, a pen or notepads or whatever, rather than put a specific number in there at this point, starting with just, I'll call it a warning, that, hey, you know, anytime this shows up, think about what the neighbor down the road might think about what you're getting or doing.
Yes.
Something along that line, rather than a specific, you know, $10 is okay, $20 is too much. I mean,
Yeah, I think, you know, with some of this, as we get further, especially once we start the definitions, and that's what I'm hearing, is that start working on the definitions,
Yep.
maybe start working on the process, because none of this is gonna be set in stone anyways, right now. But start working with that, but, you know, because we don't have enough, it's hard to get to that appearance part of it, the appearance of impropriety. So to have those discussions, you know, it'd be nice to start having that as well, because we don't wanna get there.
right, yeah.
You know, we want to avoid those too, as well as impropriety.
Yep.
So, you know, if it's okay with this committee, I'll start working on definitions, I'll start working on process. I'll take a look and start an initial section of an ordinance, but you guys can tweak it. And I think with all of these, and this blends to the next one, I don't think this is going to be a one and done. I think this is a living process, and actually your ordinance really is in and of itself. But when we talk about contract language, you go through and you figure out, okay, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and you amend or you address it down the line. So, so I'll work on that, if that is okay. Anything else that you want me to look at? So I'll work on the model code and making that more Trempealeau County friendly. And then I'll work on the ethics ordinance, starting with definition and the process to review.
I think that would make a sufficient starting point and give you enough to do.
That's good. I just want to, I'm trying to be very mindful.
Unless somebody's got a different idea.
That's great.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yep, yep. Item 12, discussion possible action, standard terms and conditions for county POS contract language. And that's yours also.
It is, and I sent it out, but I sometimes think paper is handy. Does anybody want paper to look at them? Okay,
If you got it, I'll take
I
one
think
too.
I have 6, so we should be good.
Paper still works better for me.
Oh, yeah. I'm wondering if I just does. There you go. I'll bring the two over there. So the goal of this was to create some standard terms for county contracts whenever the county needs to purchase services. Here's one, and here's the other if you want that. When we need to purchase services, it's not for purchasing items, but, you know, it's pretty frequent that a county department might need to look at, for example, putting in bunk beds. You know, there is a item that we're purchasing, but the installation is a service. And so what would be standard contractual language that we would want to set as a minimum for all contracts? The next stage to this would be developing that purchase of service contract that we could use. This would be really, I'd almost want to say an attachment or addendum to that, because where the first phrase would be, here are our parties, here's the services that we're gonna buy or purchase. The second part would be, of that model contract would be, here is the cost, and the third would be these model terms. So, this is a common thing that is done across the state. The benefit is that it puts everybody, all the departments on a level field. It standardizes our practices, so we don't have some contracts that are missing language, some don't. And then it starts creating, again, a standardization process. And I did send it out to the department heads too, to start it. And I think I mentioned it in my email to you guys. HHS is a little different. They have a standard contract that we use. We review that every summer. We're actually in the middle of that process right now. A lot of this language would mirror that. And if there's something different that we like, we'll probably start pulling that too. But they have a lot of specific provisions that we need to be very careful that we follow. So they're a little bit of an outlier.
So do some of their provisions conflict with the statement in here?
No.
Then why couldn't their contract start with all of this and then move on from there for their additional specifics?
So their contract is probably, and I can pull it up, I'm guessing it's minimum 20 pages long. It has a lot more. And plus then you have all of the
So it
additional.
would be duplicating some of this.
It would duplicate it, plus it would provide a whole bunch more than what
Right.
we need for some of our other departments. And
So I guess as I was just going through, the one along that same thought process, that why wouldn't this make some statement at the end?
there's,
Additional points per requirement for departments. Why wouldn't this have some statement along that line in it?
there is. So
Okay, then
at the
I
very
missed
end
it.
of that PO, no, that's okay. A lot of this over the process last year, because I just saw it last year for the first time, a lot of this was put into it already last year.
Okay.
So I just don't want to say with 100% certainty, because I haven't cross-referenced this with that for 2025.
Yeah, the standard contract and then,
And I could go through that if you'd
okay.
like.
I guess where I'm going, okay, reading this through, this is the standard contract. Where does it say in the standard contract additional items? An item 24, for example, is blah, blah, for Helton, or item,
I
not
see.
anything specific, but
Including-
making an allowance for additional
For
included in here.
adding additional
Yeah, that's,
information.
So we can always, because this is only part of it. So these are just, this, kind of the legalese. When you have a boilerplate, if you ever, well, you've probably drafted these, for
Drafted, no,
the
read 'em,
services,
used 'em, yes.
and then you have a second page with standard terms. This
Wow.
is that second page where
okay.
it's not the initial contract itself.
Okay,
It's
that-
part of it.
I think it goes a long way in making everything within the county uniform.
Right, yeah.
And that's the.
We've got, every committee you sit on, every contract that you see is different.
Right.
And,
Like
and
I
it's
said,
always, well, this is the way we've done it, and of course it is. But it would be much more appropriate, and we've tasked corporate counsel to, over time, review all the contracts within the county. Well, she's reviewing documents that are all different, which isn't a problem, but it just makes sense to make everything uniform, so.
And
I'm probably just reading more into it than what it is. Maybe that's my issue with it, but it just seemed that when you're talking the terms and conditions for purchase contracts, if these are the terms and conditions or the policy, basically, why wouldn't we specifically state in this that other things can be added to the or be part of the contract?
Oh,
Why-
sure,
that-
sure.
That's, I didn't see any of that
No,
that made an allowance for that sort of thing. That's all I was.
No,
asking about.
and so these are that's a good question. So going back to it, this would be an attachment to the contract itself.
Okay.
So you would have the contract that would allow identify the parties, identify what services you're purchasing,
Okay.
the responsibilities of the parties, and that's where you would add things that are in addition, and things that would be unique. This is saying that at minimum, everything, we want this in all of our contracts.
Okay, yeah.
So things that would be specific to the contract, absolutely. That would be part of the contract, it'd just be in another spot. So that's a good question, and it's a little bit hard to see this without seeing the first.
The whole thing,
Yeah,
okay.
and we'll get there, but this is a longer piece to it,
Okay,
and so I wanted to go through that first.
okay.
So,
Do we want to do any action today?
it's up to you, but I would like the opportunity to talk about it with the department heads too. I know there are some departments that by default almost, they end up having to use the vendor's contract. And sometimes we'll still have to use that. That's gonna happen, especially for very large vendors. But I think when it is a vendor that doesn't contract that often, I want to be able to give that opportunity for input. So if we could bring it back, and I can, it might take a month or 2 months, because there's a lot here. But I want to bring back with us a model contract so you can see it. But is there anything that you see that's concerning in here? They're pretty standard terms.
I don't know legally if there was something missing, I don't know. Honestly, know if I would know that it's missing.
No, and that is a very appropriate response, very, very wise response. Is there anything that you have a concern, policy-wise? Yeah, and I can go through it, a lot of this is really to make sure that whoever we are working with, that it is very clear, they have to have their credentialing in place, they have to have their license in place, they have to have all their permits in place, they are not disbarred, that they have their insurance in place. That is something that I've been trying to focus on, because it does very little good as a county to have our indemnification and hold harmless provisions if we don't have anything securing it. So we need to do that, and that's been something we've worked through. The payment there is some payment language in there. It's essentially making sure that they are compliant, and it provides us with some protections as well. So Trempealeau County will be the venue if there is an issue, or the Western Wisconsin District. We have the ability to cancel if there is some sort of non-appropriation of funds, that they can't transfer the contract. All of a sudden, they sign a contract with us, and then they transfer it to a subcontractor without our approval.
Which we've had.
Yes, we don't, that's not okay. Yeah, and, some of those, there's a force majeure provision, and unfortunately, I think we all learned through through COVID, how important it is to have those types of provisions in there. So a lot of this you've probably seen, but I want to make sure they're all in every contract to the extent we can. So,
I didn't see anything most of this is stuff that I've signed in contracts. The only thing, I see the numbers have changed since I was doing it. Used to be $1 million liability required, now it's like $2 million, yeah.
yeah. And I think I even put in there, because I think depending on the contract, we might want to, depending on what it is, increase it or vary. So, depending on the nature of the party's contract, Trempealeau County reserves the right to request additional insurance and/or amounts greater than listed above.
Yep.
So, just want to make sure that we are doing the best we can, although contracts won't cover everything. As we mentioned earlier, there will always be a factual situation where we'll go a year or two afterwards and say, we wish we would have had something a little bit different. So, but if it is okay, I will meet with the department heads. I'll ask Rebecca, I think I might have said it in my department head email, And then we'll bring it back in another month or two so you can see the full picture and go from there.
Yeah, that would be fine with me.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're done with that one.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 13, discussion action on delegation of signing authority for future opioid settlements.
So I received some good news last week where this particular resolution, which is off of the Sandoz settlement, but they're trying to incorporate more than that. Originally, it came out actually perhaps it might have been the week before, and that we were going to have it voted on before July 24th. So there was a very quick expectation, but on July 2nd, we learned that we have it until September 30th. So we have a little bit more time than we originally thought. So we can take it if you want. As I said, this was off of the Sandoz settlement, originally to make sure that we have the ability to sign on to that. But what I want to do is point out that this would delegate who would sign off onto those settlements in the future, rather than having a resolution every time we come back. And to do that, and I wanted to be consistent with what the county board has done so far, and this is largely across the state, that county boards accepted it, by resolution, and voted to participate and accept and perform certain actions. For this one, I kept that authority, and I want to be clear that this is your decision, and you can change this as you want. But I added the language here, who could sign off. And currently it says on page 2 of it, number 1, on the bottom, that the board chair would have the authority delegated to him or her to enter into future settlements. If the board was unavailable, the vice chair could perform it. And then if the vice chair is unavailable, the administrator could perform it with a notice to the county board. And so they left that up to each county to decide. And so this is proposed language, you're not tied to it. Other things that are in there is that prior to executing any settlement, the board chair would consult with Corporation Counsel about the proposed settlement and the terms, and provide notice to the administrator, Corporation Counsel, and county board once there was any new execution of any sort of settlement agreement. The distribution of that notice may be provided by the county clerk. And 3 is really, that was already in there just to, if there's some sort of action that we need to perform, whether it's submitting something or, kind of more of an administrative matter, that we have the ability to do so. I know Supervisor Larson had mentioned this, and this is on the 3rd page, and I had put it in my email, I think, to this committee, that the attorney's fees, that's a little bit different than what we've seen. And so we'll have to be very mindful of what we receive, and probably separate, until we know that the attorney fees have been paid, keep that separate. And unallocated, again, until we can make sure that we've paid all our bills, essentially. But Supervisor Larson had mentioned we could include language in there that would say at the end, something to the effect that if it comes from the general fund, that the general fund will be repaid from the amounts received from the settlements in the future. And that's absolutely something we can include if you want to.
Yep,
So I can add that in there.
yeah, it says we have to keep it enough there, but it doesn't say when the other monies come in, we get it back, and that was the point I made, that I think should be a statement included in there to that effect.
And I'm just adding that in.
Okay.
So something to the effect that funds removed from the general fund shall be repaid from settlement amounts upon receipt.
Yep.
Mary, do you have any concerns with that, as long as it's already in this resolution? Okay.
Does anybody else have any other issues or concerns with it? No, seeing as though it wasn't printed in there, we wrote it in, we've agreed to the added language. Do we have to do something different to, or is it a motion to approve an appropriate move at this point?
So you could do a couple things. So you could direct that I come back next month with additional general fund language, and that's the only thing that we're adding into it
yep.
right now. If you want to do that, that's certainly okay. We have time to do that. That's well before the September deadline that we've talked about. The language regarding the board chair and the vice chair and the administrator, that's already in here.
Yep.
So it's up to you. If you want me to just amend, you could have, the other option you would have is you could vote to approve it with the amended language with the general funds. And we could either have it signed today or signed right before county board. And it would be up to you what is your preference?
The only other little thing that I picked out, in the who signs, it starts out with chair, vice chair, and administrator. Then when you get to 3, the positions are reversed in the order. Does that mean anything?
We could, if you would like to change it, 2 is in that same order too, except it's county board. It's entirely up to you what your preference is.
Just for consistency in the, whatever you want to call it, chain of command, or whatever you want to call it. That the board chair be listed first under item 3 and then.
And did I hear you say vice chair? I would just put in vice chair as applicable if you wanted. And I would note that the fiscal impact, it should say unknown. It's not in there, but it should say that, just to close that loop.
What does anybody else think? Are you
I
comfortable moving it on with this language change? Or do you want it to be changed and reprinted and brought back? What do you want to do?
I don't see, I would be comfortable approving it based on the adjustments to it.
Okay? No.
Right, if we were adding a whole paragraph
Yeah,
or
yep.
changing the verbiage dramatically, we're just adding in, and I think I'll make that motion to approve it with the amendments that Corp Council has discussed.
I'll second.
A second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Moving on.
Thank you.
You might get done yet today. Now, the next one is possible action authorizing the transfer of the opioid funds to the Trempealeau County Sheriff's Office to support a community reentry coordinator position.
So this position started out as, it was in hopes of having a full-time mental health provider in the jail. And through discussions, it was decided, or discovered that for a couple reasons that may not be practical. And number one was that it would require a pretty substantial salary. And number two, even if we offered the best salary, we may not find anybody to do it. So Jamie Kurth with the Department of Human Services has been instrumental with us coming up with what we call the Community Reentry Coordinator position instead. And it does a number of those same functions, but only has to have a social worker degree and comes with a much more affordable salary. So, a job description was created for a community reentry coordinator. And this was presented to the opioid settlement committee for consideration, and they did approve the allocation of funds to fund this position as a employee of the Trempealeau County Sheriff's Office. Just quickly, some of the duties that this position would do would be develop and implement reentry programs and services, including job training, education, substance abuse, mental health services, medicated assistant treatment, and other support services. This is a little different than the programming piece we talked about earlier. This is specifically to, although all inmates could fall under this program is specific to opioid addiction and the mental health issues that come with that. And a substantial number of our inmates do have opioid addiction, or what's it called? OID, opioid use disorder. And currently, there really are no support services for that person once they're released from custody. We can start them on treatments while they're in jail, but those will not work unless they have those follow-up services once they're released from custody. And that's what this position is meant to do, to get doctor's appointments scheduled, to find a doctor, to get doctor's appointments scheduled, to get them on health insurance, perhaps help them find employment that has health insurance, stuff like that. Again, this would be for all inmates in the jail, and funded solely with opioid settlement funds. There is a grant that Angela has applied for that would fund this position 50% for the first year. So I'm not sure what the final resolution says for a dollar amount from the opioid settlement committee, but it's possible that 50% of it would be funded by this grant as well.
In
So,
addition to the number that was presented.
no, it would offset that the way.
Offset that.
Yeah, so it would leave funds in the grant, in the settlement piece yet for future expenditures. I don't have the final resolution in front of me. There was some discussion on what that, be it resolved, was going to look like as far as a dollar amount. So,
Is that the one where we had like 360,000 and then it was, then it said annually? I said, no, that ain't
Right.
annually, that's a one-shot deal.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I saw that in your office. I haven't been able to locate it
Yeah, I
since.
can't find it here.
So I think the intent there, and this was, Angela admitted, this was her first attempt at writing a resolution, but the intent there was, that was the total money that was gonna be available with current funding, the current fund balance. That was the total amount that was gonna be available to fund this position, and that it would go out however many years until that money was gone. And then part of the resolution is that either the position disappears at that time, or alternate funding sources have to be located at that time. And then I questioned the dollar amount because I can't carry over salary money in my budget. I don't carry it over from one year to the next. So to put 320,000 in there, and if I only use 80,000 the first year, there's no provision for me to carry their balance over into subsequent years. And I just haven't seen that resolution come back yet. So maybe it's not even ready. That was my last response to Angela, and I haven't seen it back, so maybe it's not even ready to vote on yet today. I don't know, but.
Not the way.
I don't see anything.
Does it-
Get on the agenda
I can't
here at all.
find it anyplace on here.
Does it need to go to a separate fund then, or could it just stay in the opioid monies account?
It could-
Because the committee has earmarked that money for that.
It could sit in a separate account, I would think, until it's called for.
Is there a
Right, that's
certain
why
amount
I'm
of years we
asking,
gotta
does
use
it, does it
or-
need to? Because the
put
committee's
it in there.
already
You better-
designated
Mary's
that
question,
amount.
Can you set up a separate account for that money? That, you know, they get like 80,000 of it this year and 80,000 next year or whatever? Can you set up account
Yeah, I can step off and check with the auditors.
where it sits? Until it's used, otherwise it's a pain in the butt going back and forth every year. That's-
Sounds to me like this needs a little bit more work before.
Well, it probably does if it didn't get ready. I also recommended that, there was a place for it on like a wage scale, that's how we figured, and then, but a wage would be $28 an hour, and I had put the request to get that and the fringes and everything, what a total cost is, and apparently that didn't get back either if this.
I don't see
other
anything about it,
language,
I
so-
can't find it, so.
Okay.
So, is that, there's no real, we don't have to do anything with this right now, or do we, or what, if that grant is involved, no, was there a timeline on that?
Well, this is funds we basically have already.
Yeah.
so
I know, but you were talking about getting a grant, do we have to have something designated to qualify as part of the grant application?
That'd be a question for Angela. She's the one that's doing all the grant writing for this piece.
Sometimes
We don't anticipate.
Sometimes we
I
have
think
to have something
anticipate a
set
January
aside in
1st
order to
start
apply
date.
for a grant.
So-
Right, no, it's fine.
Okay.
So we're okay that way. Yeah, and we had anticipated January 1st
Right.
to start, so.
Okay.
And it would give Mary time to see, make sure how she could set that up, and if we can hold. I think there's a lot of unknowns here.
Well, if we don't have the exact resolution, I mean,
Yeah.
we can afford to put it off
Okay,
until the August meeting, so.
Okay.
But it would go through law enforcement, exec finance, personal bargaining, and county board all in August then.
Right,
So,
yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're gonna just
a lot of work
move
to
it to
do
the,
now,
ne-
yeah.
move it to next month for
Next
more?
month.
Okay. Too much other stuff on here to make my notes. Okay, and the next one was 15, that's done. Discussion/action on alignment of a county board supervisor payroll with regular payroll schedule. With Rebecca and Stacy talking to us.
Is that on here? Is that on the board too?
Okay, so I had sent you a memo on this regarding a transition to paperless wait, now, are we on that one? Yeah, paperless payroll, right? No.
No,
I
we're
got-
on the
I'm
the
sorry,
regular
county
payroll
board.
schedule.
County board's
Yeah,
payroll
okay.
schedule.
Moving to a regular payroll schedule, and I'll ask Stacy to kind of talk as well because she deals with this. But background, you saw in the past, there had been a decision by, I think it was the Exec Finance Committee, right? Yeah, long time ago. And the decision at that time was that after meeting attendance, that the payroll had to immediately process county board meeting payroll, sometimes within 24 hours. And so that Stacy has to drop everything and get this extra pay in off from our regular scheduled time. So it creates challenges, especially when you try to schedule time off, and it's very difficult then for an employee to do that. And so I gave you a whole bunch of issues that are currently happening, and I'll just let Stacy talk a little bit about that.
This was actually Mary's idea, which was brilliant because she used to do this. Yeah, she used to do this, so
Did you
she
turn your
knows.
mic on for?
It is on.
It is, I can't see the light from there. Okay, now I can see it. Okay.
It would be like John, as county board chair, gets paid after the county board meeting with the next regular payroll. And that's what we're suggesting with the county board members. So like this month, you're gonna turn in all July meetings. On that July meeting spreadsheet, you'll also put county board. And then in August, I'll pay you for all of July's meetings. It'll just help streamline the process and, like we've said, make things less duplicate. I mean, there's only 17 of you, but there's only 16 on that payroll. It would just make more sense to put you in with our big payroll.
Actually, when I came
can
onto
see
the
that.
board, I was really surprised at all the different ways and how we submit our meetings. I understand the healthcare center, why there's a need to do that a little differently. But I fully agree, and I would make that motion to change that and have it be on the county's.
I've actually talked to some of the board
Supervisors.
members, and none of them have a problem that I've talked to. They
Yeah,
Get
I-
moved back, and it's not a big deal, and so,
And with our new payroll system coming,
yeah.
we're gonna have to figure out how to do this. I think at first we're gonna start with, I'm gonna enter things until we get transitioned where you guys can enter your own time, we're hopefully gonna get to, but that'll be a little bit yet.
This is simplified for you.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, I still think it's gonna be several months before that's actually activated. The other thing I'd like to say is there any way that a document can just be created online that we fill in and click the box for the correct meeting, fill in the date, and then
Yeah.
basically just fill it in similar to what we do now, but you just get everything electronically and it goes right to you
Yep.
or the appropriate person, whoever that may be.
Yep, and I
As
do have
opposed
those
to-
all electronic, so I could do it that way, and if we're doing one, I can squish them into one sheet instead of, like, some of you get 3 different sheets depending what committee you're on.
Well, and that was the other thing I was gonna say, we don't need to get 3 different sheets, because Health and Human Services is together now. So for the last couple
Not for
months.
budget purposes yet.
Oh, so that's
Correct.
why we're getting.
Yes.
Okay, so do we put them on both sheets then?
No, if you were originally on Human Services, put it on Human Services. If you were originally on Health Department, put it on Health Department.
Oh, okay, so because I was on both, then I don't need both.
Don't need
Got it.
both, yep.
Okay.
What about
That
the
makes sense.
UKG piece of this?
UKG, you guys all have your laptops, so when it comes to the time and you're in this meeting, we want you recording your meeting and your mileage while you're there.
This is what Supervisor Turner's asking.
Yep.
And that's the system we'll be going to?
But
So-
until then, what I'm looking for is something electronic,
Yeah.
because
It's-
it gets to you faster if
Correct.
we can fill it out electronically, as opposed, I've had mine ready for a couple weeks, but haven't been here physically. So I suppose I
Yep.
could scan it, but it's probably easier if we just
Yep, send you one electronically.
have a link on
I
our
can do
computer
that.
and
You
we
could
just
do it
fill it
simply?
and shoot it to you.
Yeah,
I only ask because we're making the UKG transition soon, like September, and so we're in the process of that already. So just so that it's not taking a lot of time to create and make all that happen,
no,
you
I
can just do
have
it
those
easy?
ready, so
Okay.
I just send her one sheet and break it out quick.
Okay, okay.
There's only a few that I have to break out that way into different funds is what it's for, the separate sheets.
Mary's still gonna take care of the county board meetings themselves, right? Or are we-
No, we were looking at
Oh.
you putting it on your sheet and me paying you for this month, July's meeting in August.
I'm just waiting to get my check for April 2026.
I was gonna bring that, you beat me to the.
Stop it, you guys. I'm in a hurry. I grabbed the wrong year. I'm trying to speed up your terms here. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, it saves on the auto deposits, it saves in entering all of that information. It's a one and done every month.
How are we coming
supervi-
on the, what do you call, auto deposit or whatever?
That's the next one.
That's next one.
Yeah, but we,
Good.
okay. I don't think there's a problem with it. You made the motion, did you get
Yeah.
a
I
second?
made a
Yeah.
motion.
Doc,
I
I don't know.
Good
Doc,
think
point.
Doc seconded it.
Okay.
Doc, can you second it?
Fine.
This was triggered because you guys had that special meeting in May and I didn't know about it. And then I need to pay you the next day. And I'm like, there was this another meeting. I didn't know. And then, so that's why Mary thought if we do it this way, it'll all be on your sheet. You're responsible for telling me you were there, you had mileage, or you were virtual, and it'll all be in one spot.
That'd be good.
Yep. Okay. Any more? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Doc.
Doc.
Doc, you agreed to the second.
Okay, and the discussion and possible action on county payroll to direct deposit.
So you've got a memo on this as well, and so this is our efforts again to make our systems more efficient. We had about a dozen or so, or a couple dozen people that were getting paper checks. And so we'd like to clean that up with our move to these new software systems. And just, I've already had these conversations with Supervisor Larson and Chair
I agreed to
Austin.
concede and quit getting the paper check. yes.
Yeah, because they were two of the big ones. So, and we've talked to personnel bargaining about this as well, and just want to continue to bring this forward so that everybody is aware, make sure that everybody's okay with this, because it would, again, make things a lot easier on payroll, if you want to talk about that again too, Stacy.
Just, well, you're gonna have your funds right away. We just had someone lose some checks, so that is a burden to replace them. And with the mail, it's taken a week or two to get it, so it would be in the best interest of yourself to get your funds faster by direct deposit. Plus, with the new company, it's not that the checks are gonna cost incredibly amount more, but I'm gonna have something called Micker ink in my printer, and that's more expensive than regular ink. So the less checks I have to print, the better. So, and with this new transition to our new payroll system, you can put your check into 10 different banks if you want. That's all up to you. You can do it in your, well, I'll help you guys. But it's all up to the employee. They can do it in their system. They can access their portal and split it up where they want. Currently, we don't do that. I put it into one account, and it's the employee's decision what they do with it from then.
How many people take checks now?
Currently, we gave the employees till June 30th to switch it over. We have a few committee members, and I think I had 6 or 7 people that just turned in their stuff for this payroll. So I roughly print 10 to 15, 20 checks at a time. I have to print checks for garnishments, which with our new system, we're able to do some electronically, so that'll cut down a minimum. And if you're a new employee, I cut your check the first pay period, so I run your numbers through the Federal Reserve to make sure that your numbers are all correct on their end before I actually send it there, or it gets kicked back.
How will that work then for the checks that are printed through the healthcare center and sent to us?
What I mail to you from the healthcare center, or what they mail to you in a green check, is your mileage. So,
Right.
and we cut your mileage in payroll, so that is one thing that we need to discuss, why they don't do your mileage on your payroll check. I don't know. So that is a burden to cut 2 different checks, which is kind of odd. But we are going through some transitions with the healthcare center and their payroll, also trying to get it into our UKG system to cut down on the things that I have to hand add.
And we do come to see you with the numbers to set this up,
Yep.
correct?
Or if you bring it to the county board meeting, give it to Mary
Okay.
or Wendy. I trust that it's coming from you.
Well, I should try to get that to the board meeting then.
Yeah, that would be best. And it's best if it's hand delivered, because the electronic, I don't really trust. You don't know if somebody's trying to scam you or not.
Okay, so all I need is.
A motion.
Get from the bank or the credit union.
Yep. Yep. And I can email you guys the direct deposit form also.
You got the form, you gave me one.
Yep, I gave you the
Yeah.
form. I can email it
That was easy.
to the board members that are not on my direct deposit yet. Yep, I can email it to you. I have not yet.
Oh, okay, do that.
Okay.
Yeah, do that, yeah.
So you need a motion, Dave?
I think we do, yep.
I'll make that motion to transition the payroll to direct deposit only.
Okay,
Second.
second. Any more questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks, Stacy.
Item 18, discussion possible action on development of an evaluative criteria per employment contract. This came up to me and I talked to Susan, and apparently, I'll turn it over to you, explain it.
So we were looking at some of our processes as well as our contracts. And this is, this particular one was related to specifically the administrator contract. And the language in it says that the county administrator's review as specified herein shall be annually performed in September. That's in section 5, page 3. So what we need from section 4, excuse me, I said section 5, but it should be section 4, is that we need to have criteria created. And this is something that we need in general. This is specific to the position, but that's what we need is the criteria specific to this position, which is what was in the action item as well. And so we need today is not the evaluation. This is, again, just about the evaluation criteria. We need a mechanism to create it. And Becky, I don't know if you want to add anything in addition to this, or?
No, I guess not.
No, that's
I
fair.
don't really know. I did a 360 review, just with all of you, with all of the department heads, and yeah, so this would just be another form of that, I guess.
And I should add that I believe that this was added in February because to be done in September so that you could do it before you got to the budgeting process.
I
So-
think my understanding that what we were going to do in September for the budget, prior to the budgeting process, was more of a brief review, not a full review, performance review, as we did initially, where every single department head, everybody, mass emails were sent out. So are we just adding language that we would do this annually or before the budget? Or when would we do the full
So this-
performance
yeah.
review?
So looking at our contract, and this is under, again, section 4, performance evaluation. It says in there that the county board chairs shall provide the executive finance or the committee with a copy of the performance evaluation completed for the administrator, excuse me. The county board chair, in coordination with the executive finance committee, shall provide the administrator with a written summary. So we have some of the processes in there, but if you go to the previous paragraph, it says the county board chair, in coordination with the executive finance committee, shall review and evaluate the administrator's performance annually. Said review and evaluation shall be in coordination with specific criteria developed by the county and shall consider the above referenced goals and objectives. And then it says other evaluation criteria may be added or deleted from time to time as determined by the county board chair in coordination with the executive finance committee. So we don't have that, certainly, I think last year, because we didn't have it and there was a need for it, we've used that 360 process, and this was in here. This is very similar to what was in there before, but I think Becky was trying to follow the contract to the best that we could with the processes we had. This is trying to get to a next step with developing our criteria regardless, the criteria for this position. And again, it's the position that I'm talking about now. We could, for one thing, we could take a look at how all staff are evaluated and pull from there. If you wanted to look at something else, we could do that, but this is to start that process of how do we perform our contractual obligation in September. And that's unique to both this committee as well as to the chair.
I mean, and I think probably everybody would agree that we just finished an eval. So, I guess my question is, and what you're asking is that how often are we planning on doing this? And what the criteria should be within that?
I'll just bring this, to me, and our past one, and this is nothing against Rebecca or anything else, it's just, I looked at what I saw the process. It was sent out as a request by her. Information, raw information went back to her.
No,
Well,
It went
where
to-
did it go?
It went to IT.
IT, okay, but it's still all public, sort of. I mean, it was not a, maybe I misunderstood. But it seemed like, did you, okay, hey, let's lay it out here. Did you have access to the raw answers?
And then the data was put in and analyzed and given to me.
Okay, so where is that raw data now?
The raw data, I guess, with IT. I mean,
I'm just looking at the whole thing and saying, is there room for error, whatever, you know? As you
So-
probably figured out by
I
now,
mean
my
altering.
mind goes to weird
Error
places sometimes.
altering. Are you discussing where room for error or altercation
Alter.
of the results?
Altercate, that would be another part too. I guess error was not the right word.
So I guess then the question would go to IT if that process, if there's an ability for that process.
So I think if you wanted those records, the request could be made to IT. My concern is we have a contract, yeah, and I'm looking for a standardized process. I want to be very clear, I'm looking for, something that is, it is to go through and perform the evaluation, it could be anybody. But we have a contract that's been signed, and it does state specifically in here that it's going to be performed again in September. I think it's a good point to say, yep, we did this in February, but I also recognize that the contract,
We discussed that, yes.
yes.
So why wouldn't we, if we're gonna standardize it, I think everybody, as far as I know on the board, liked the questions that were asked
Maybe they
in
say,
that
"I
initial
I wish we had a
evaluation.
copy of them here."
Why wouldn't we just use the same one that we did before so we can compare apples to apples?
So I guess that would be a question that we could do, and part of this is an action item so that it's directed to staff to do it. So, for example, there could be a direction that Becky sends to other HR staff, those questions, they might already have it, and to proceed to pull that as the criteria that this committee uses. And just to also put this on your radar, PB also has the contractual right as well as obligation to provide input to that evaluation. So we would have to
That
have
would
a
make
joint,
sense,
yeah, exactly. So we'll have to have a joint committee at some point to be able to perform our contractual task.
And, I don't know, from what I see here and what we did, there's nothing that says we couldn't use that information from a few months ago.
Absolutely.
But it needs to be spelled out how we do it.
Right.
Yeah, that,
We don't have a process right now.
process, right.
That's
Yeah,
what we're
that's
looking
the
at,
bad thing.
is looking at how do we create the process. And so one option would be to get all of those questions and formulate that. Another option, and I would recommend doing both, get all of the questions that would be used for employees as well.
Yep.
And see what's there. Obviously, it's a different role, but just to make sure that there's not something missed.
I guess my understanding when we did that was that when we did a reeval before budget time, that it wouldn't be a complete reeval, that it would be county board members and maybe even possibly directors, that it wouldn't be fully open. And I think the reason that we, in my mind, why we were thinking that was because we didn't want that amount of time spent by all these employees, that it was just more oversight for the county supervisors.
Is there a company that
Does anybody
this?
else have the same feel? I don't know.
I don't know that it's necessary to do that, what you're talking, the whole thing that way, but something to set up the process based on what the contract says we need to do. That's where we need to think of something. I don't have an answer. I got all
Does the
questions.
contract say that we need to do a full
So it
with
just,
all of the directors and everybody else again?
nope, it doesn't. And
It just says one has to be done.
Right.
Yes, and again, regardless of whoever it is, I think this would be something that would be held in closed session and performed through that process as well.
Just for information, what we did in the past is the committee, assigned committee for that department head did the director, and the director took care of all the employees. But say the health department, we would evaluate the health department director, and her employees, or whoever it was, would do their own employees. Each committee was in charge of the director. That's what we used
Yeah,
to.
it used to be, but that has changed with an administrator. That's not the process
Yeah.
that gets used now, so.
And you guys are the oversight committee for the administrator in general.
Right.
Under our ordinance.
No.
So it would make sense for a contract to state that. It doesn't, the language, there are only a couple of paragraphs here. It's pretty bare bones. It says the county board chair, and I've said this before, but because I don't think you have it in front of you. The county board chair, in coordination with the executive finance committee, shall review and evaluate the administrator's performance annually. Said review and evaluation shall be in coordination with specific criteria developed by the county and shall consider the above referenced goals and objectives. Other evaluation criteria may be added or deleted from time to time as determined by the county board chair in coordination with exec finance. Paragraph C just talks about how it's more procedural. And then D talks about the county administrator also serves as the county human resources director. As long as that continues, the personnel bargaining committee may also provide evaluative input and information to the executive finance committee as part of that committee's annual performance process. And then the last paragraph is the county administrator's review as specified herein shall be annually performed in September.
See, no, I read that as this board gets together and analyzes whatever, maybe the previous, what we did before and say, okay, is this what we're still, or whatever, but the process needs to be established on how that goes about. That's all it's about.
So I would suggest, and you're saying personnel bargaining, this would also go to,
It would be a joint committee.
Procedurally.
Yep. I think
so
that just
then
makes
my
sense.
recommendation would be that we use the same evaluation that we used before. And that it be sent and submitted to the IT department as before, compiled, and just for the county board members.
Just for, what was that last?
Just to the county supervisor members.
Okay, yeah.
And it should be held secret, or it should be held in confidence for just the board member.
Yeah.
Right, because
No one else has
everything else
access
that
to
we
it.
did previous, the results were out there for the employees and everybody
Right,
else
yeah.
to see. And I think what we don't want to do is we don't want to send a message to whether it be employees or community residents that, geez, they're reevaluating, or they just did one in 2 months, where they think we don't have confidence in our administrator. So, right.
Oh, I think that's a good question. And, you know, one thing that could be, I'm going to throw it out there as a possibility, but I think it is a loaded opportunity. Or take it as that term as you will, with it being Monday. That language is in the contract. The contract could be amended. Oh, thank you, Brittany. Thank you. This should be the revised resolution.
Oh.
So, thank you. We could take it out, but we'd also have to go back to the county board to take it out. And so then the question would be, why are we taking out the evaluation? What are we trying to hide? What's going on? So it cuts both ways, is what
Right.
I'm trying to say.
Right.
And here we have a contract. I think the most significant change to this contract from the previous provisions was actually that inclusion of that September language.
Yeah.
Because that is a new one for the signed contract. But we have it, so now we need to establish a process. And how do we make that process clear? And how do we make it objective from the get-go before we go through it? And I agree, however you want to make it so that that information is private, I think it should be. But we need to have a process.
Yeah, and I think the administrator position and person needs to know that it's secured and it's private as well.
Yep.
So do
So-
we send then, do we need to vote on that?
I think it would be a good issue to have voted on, but I want to be clear, because I'm not sure what the action or what the vote is. Are you voting to have the exact same survey done with those questions? Or those questions get pulled and they are sent to the supervisors?
Yeah,
I'm not.
It'd be nice to know what
my
they were. It'd be nice
recommendation
to know
was
what
to
they were.
use the same,
We can't vote on something we can't remember what we even had. You know, we should have had those in front of us today so we could look at them and say, yeah, I think these questions are adequate, or no, I think these questions need to be
Well-
changed, and we don't have them.
but we also have the terminology of standardized. So if we start changing the questions or pulling certain questions out that we like or we don't like and whatever, now we're not standardized anymore. And
But you're not
I
improving it
think
either.
that the Personnel Bargaining Committee might want to adapt that process or
Mm-hmm.
maybe be better skilled to do that, but I
And we
think
have
this
2 months.
committee should
The
just
contract specifically
recommend that we
states
leave it as
the
it,
chair and this
we already
committee.
had it,
Why is personnel bargaining?
and do it again.
Involved?
That's a good question. So Supervisor Larson asked, why is personal bargaining involved when it specifically is for this committee? And that's by ordinance as well as contract, that the oversight committee is this one. That's because we have a dual role. We have the administrator and the HR director combined
Oh,
into
okay.
the same position. So,
As well as she is an employee, so she would have this, the administrator position would have the same rights to
Right.
go to personnel bargaining as well.
similar rights, because we have a contracted employee.
Okay, true.
So this is different.
Okay.
But long and short of it, we still have a contract that says that the evaluation, and including the criteria, is developed here. And so we need to figure out how we're going to get that. We have 2 months. We don't need it today. We can vote on it next month. But we need to start this conversation so that we're not stuck in September trying to figure out what are we voting on. And it's not fair to anybody to have that criteria not be clear. We need to have that established.
So back to what you were saying, Adi, are you saying maybe we should have a shortened version of what we had before? Because this is now gonna become an annual. We're not gonna do another one, I'm assuming, again in June, or not June, April, did we
No.
do that?
No, by the terms of this contract, it's in September.
It's
so it'd
just
be
gonna now be in
September
every
2026.
September.
Yep.
I'm just thinking that was our first attempt ever to have one.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably wasn't perfect. It'd be nice to have them in front of us to say, I don't like changing it every time either, I agree. Because you
Right.
have nothing steady to value your decisions off of, but I don't know if that first one was perfect or not, and it'd be nice to see what we are asking.
I don't think any performance review is perfect. The only thing that I can say is I've written a lot of performance reviews for the village. I've done a lot of evaluations. That was the most comprehensive one I've ever even seen. It was way more than we probably need. But since it checks all the boxes and
And if it does,
covers
fine.
I'm
I'm not saying it didn't, I just said I
Right.
like
We
voting
can
something I
bring
can't
it,
see.
we could bring it to the next meeting for
Yeah.
But I,
discussion.
Yeah,
you know,
and that would be that.
And
action
and the
item.
procedural thing would be nice to have more.
Okay.
Who
So-
gets what, where does it go, and I think we should, I think that confidential part should be more in there too, just for the committees.
So I'll make a motion then to bring the previous one to the next meeting so that we can look at it. Now, and then it goes to personnel bargaining?
No, so that's a separate process.
Okay.
So they need to provide you with input. And they can provide input by having a joint committee meeting, that is fine, but you guys are the ones that perform that evaluation.
And are
Yeah.
we also going to get input then, to Dave's question, he wanted to make sure that it was all secured data.
Right, yeah.
So I think that's a really good question. First and foremost, I think we need to look at how we can best protect that. And I have a couple of thoughts, but I guess I would like to run some of it by Becky. And because of the makeup of the structure, who should get that information? And maybe it goes directly to the chair. And if you have somebody that is also helping you, kind of corral it. If you have 17, different, opinions, or you have 5, it doesn't really matter. But that should go to the chair. I'm not sure I necessarily want to see it, to be honest. But we need to develop this. These are questions that we need to think about, and we need to think about it before September.
Right, and we only have one more meeting
Right.
before September.
Right.
So if something needs to be brought back to us.
What's that, John?
At least it's early in the month.
Right.
So we'll have basically all of August to think about it.
But if we're,
Yes, Susan and I can talk about the process, and maybe Supervisor Turner, if you wouldn't mind giving input, if we share it with you and kind of give input to it, since you've already done a lot for the village.
yeah.
I mean,
On the-
I
on
think
the
if we were going to
process.
do it year in, year out, it's extremely comprehensive. But I think it's probably better to have one thorough one every year than
Right.
than
I agree.
5 questions and try to cover you can't cover everything in 5 questions.
Right.
So I think,
I'm not arguing about
no, I know,
questions.
but
I
you want to
just-
see something.
I just wanted to see what they were, that would refresh me, that's all I wanted, that's all I was saying. I didn't say I liked the questions or I didn't, because who can remember what happened that long ago? It's the process, I think, is what we were trying to really
Yes.
get down
Right,
back.
Yes.
Can
of who
we
gets what.
shoot an electronic copy to all of the exec
That
finance
would be a good
committee?
idea.
A blank copy?
Yeah, that's fine, I think that's great.
And then just in consideration of that, because I don't remember this, I think they were more opinion. Becky, do you remember whether there was any criteria used, like a scale, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, or anything like that in the?
Yeah, there was. It
Okay.
was a 1 to 5, wasn't
One
it?
to 5, you know.
Okay,
And there was, I think we would also have to make sure that it's clear what the 1 to 5 was, because we did have 2 people that we thought
right.
they did,
One was
Five-
good and 5 was bad? or
right,
the
they
opposite?
flip-flopped those results.
And this, to the extent that, the administrator does have some of the same protections. There's some differences, but some of the same protections as well. HR files are not just something that are exposed and made public to everybody who asks. And so this would be part of that process as well. And I think any discussion, whether at some point you're going to have a committee meeting, I would encourage you to think about who you want in that room. You certainly don't need to have all staff in here. You can also decide, what records you want to create. Think about the process of what you want along the way. But we want it clear, we want it known, because this is part of our requirements in our contract. So we need to have a clear, fair, objective process, and we need it unfortunately by September.
We could actually meet before the county board meeting for a half hour and bring in, if we get the contract, and you'd send out your suggestions on protocol.
I think we'll have an August
Yeah,
regular
yeah, we
meeting
have
and
That
a
would give you
September
2 months.
regular meeting before that, so
I'm just saying that
We got-
if you,
two meetings.
it's gonna
I'd be
take
a
a
little
while.
concerned about a meeting on this, if there's any potential private information that is discussed at that meeting. I don't know. It would be, and I don't know, having it right before the board meeting, you can contain
No,
enough.
I think that's a good point. And, again, this is just about the development of the
Committee meeting,
criteria.
that's before.
And so.
What's that?
I was talking about having a committee meeting before the.
I know,
board
So-
meeting.
but
in-
you'd have to have that committee meeting in a separate room, or you're gonna have people coming for the full board meeting, standing and wanting to get in, and
It's distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right,
And it
well,
can't
distracting is
be-
one word.
And you were just speaking, though, of reviewing the eval and approving the eval that we were going to use, not the actual eval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
And
right,
just,
and then it would be a and if we thought of some procedures that we wanted to go, you could just note them down and just give you or whoever, or the committee, or whoever, like Susan said, whoever we want to put on there, we'd have we at least we'd have some direction to go to.
Yeah, and just again, we have until September to have the evaluation performed. So this is just developing the process ahead of time. And so we could certainly talk about this, we have to talk about this in August. And then if there was some fine tuning, then we could talk about the fine tuning in August. But at this point, I don't know if we need to have
Do
any
you
additional.
have enough information in your notes from this conversation to bring some kind of a suggestion to us in August? That this is what I heard you say, and have it spelled out, that we can look at and say, yeah, we said this, I'm not sure we said that.
So what I am gathering is that from this committee, the questions from that survey need to be pulled and organized so you can read them. Kind of all in maybe a single document. You should already have the contract, but I think including that so that you can see it would be helpful. I would also say that chapter 2 in our ordinance needs to be pulled so you can see that as well and review the duties.
I think you got that well covered.
I don't,
But now you said September. Is it the
September
first,
is
or
when there
it
would
the-
need to be a closed session to do the evaluation.
Okay, is it, so it's just anytime in September?
August is getting the process set up
Okay.
that we will use in
September.
to do the evaluation.
And, this is really, keep an eye for, now, but we would have to do this next year or the year afterwards or anything. What should that process be? So how do we keep it fair? How do we keep it, objective? I think confidential is a very important part of this as well. So what kind of things? And you guys are gonna see things a little bit differently than staff as well.
Okay. So,
What's the motion?
well, you started the motion, and then we got into conversation.
Right. Motion would be that we receive those documents on paper that Susan talked about and a blank copy of the eval that we did previously at next month's meeting. And then in the meantime, if there's other processes that we think we want to add, delete, or recommend, maybe Susan, myself, and Rebecca can get together. I do want to make the current administrator part of this process because we want it to continue in future, no matter who the administrator is. And we also want to be fair to that, what's in the contract, so we also need Susan. So that's my motion, in short.
Anybody understand the motion enough to make a
That's a-
second?
Just the
That's a
short,
big-
beginning part
big-
is all you
Big
need.
motion, but I'll second it anyway.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
You're gonna make it.
Yeah. I was watching that. Okay, item 19. Our next meeting will be August 4th, 2025, right? At 8 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I could talk about contracts more if you'd like.
And with
I was
that,
waiting
I
for the
will
HIPAA
adjourn this
compliance
meeting at
to really come up.
10:46, I guess it is.